Hi, this is Corey Goode, and thank you for joining me on the Sphere Being Alliance YouTube channel. Please click subscribe immediately. You want to know when this material comes out. Also hit the bell, or smash the bell as they say, so you are notified when new content comes out. Today I'm at El Dorado Springs once again. You can probably hear the river in the background a little bit, the birds chirping. It's another beautiful day in El Dorado Springs. I wanted to first talk to you about some breaking news. I've discussed how ufology is in disarray and, there's all sorts of problems. Well, it turns out that a very important figure, Jan Harzan of MUFON, the executive director, was arrested on July 3rd. And it turns out that the arrest was for crimes against children. Very disturbing. We want to note that people are innocent until proven guilty, but it's just one example of the sad state of ufology. There are other people out there that are going to disappoint us in a very similar way, and over the next year, I think there's going to be a lot learned about those who control ufology that are up high, and I hope you understand that we shouldn't focus on people and not to be devastated as more of these types of things come to light. I also want to thank those who've been looking into Light Warrior Legal Fund and the legal cases I have trying to clean up ufology and make sure that cyber stalking doesn't happen to anyone ever again. Thank you for those contributing there, and also those who have contacted us and given us evidence and testimony. As I said in the cave, these are the types of people that don't lie to federal judges. And they're very credible, upstanding people, and we appreciate them coming forward. They didn't have to. On the note of covering some small things before we get on to the interview, also please go to acceleratingascension.com. Make sure you get on the mailing list. We're going to have a lot of new content coming out, free, and other seminars as well. So please get on the mailing list. Now, today I'm going to play for you a recording of a conversation I had with Dr. Sala yesterday. We discussed the state of ufology a little bit, I think, but we discussed the Q-munity, the counterintelligence program that's being launched against them, a little bit of my updates from the Alliance, as well as some very disappointing information about what we can look forward to when it comes to official disclosure. It's going to be more around a time travel narrative, and those of us in the community who have had experiences with non-terrestrials, they're not even going to listen to. We're going to be off the table. Everyone's delusional because there are no aliens. They're ancient aliens, but what we're seeing in the skies now is supposedly just us from the future. So sit back, listen to this interview with Dr. Sala and I, and write down in the comments what you think. And thanks again for joining us. Okay, recording with Dr. Sala about new updates.
Hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Well, sounds like a really major kind of process is beginning now.
Yeah, things have been so quiet for months. I mean, I wasn't getting real, proper briefings. A lot of the different, general, colonel, and pretty major types that I did have connections to, their briefings were getting sparse. And often what would happen, not necessarily with the people I was talking to, but they would tell me, listen, the people I'm normally getting briefs from, they are obviously bringing speculation to the table. A lot of these people, they get used to being the go-to person for intel. And I kind of understand that a little bit. And when they don't have intel, they'll just start kind of speculating amongst themselves and coming up with the most likely scenario, which is often not accurate. But often, sometimes information that's handed down the chain, even through QAnon and other sources. Sometimes there's a little misinformation in there to throw off the enemy. So we've got to be able to kind of weed our way through, through that as well. That's just a part of counterintelligence. Like it, hate it, that's just the way it is. And I think everyone that's been awakening from all of the QAnon stuff and other info like you and I've been bringing out, this mass awakening is creating a hunger for this content, which is a good thing, but it's also a time that we have to be careful for potential, disinformation to come in to try to sideline or divert, what the alliance is trying to do.
So is this a group, like a coherent group that are kind of like briefing you, or are we talking about just disparate sources that, like our NATO, like John and James and so forth, just operating independently?
Very different Tom, Dick, Harrys, and Harriets that are connected into the group that we call the Alliance. I am not getting, a couple years ago, it was so open to where some of these people would have briefings on bridge calls, and a lot of them were letting other people listen in to their call into bridge calls, and a lot of information was disseminated that way. But things obviously have tightened way, way up. So what we have to rely on are some of these people that, and I'm told, I don't know how information is being disseminated now, but they're not doing the bridge calls because of the security issues. But the people that used to be on these bridge calls, once the bridge calls were cut off from people below them, they were then, they were taking notes during the calls, and then they were coming to people like myself and saying, okay, let's see, Corey guy, okay, he's out here, this is what he's talking about. And they will give me some information that applies to what I'm doing. They tell everyone you're getting a full briefing, but you're just getting a briefing that they feel applies to you. And so because of the way that's done, I triangulate information from at least 3 different sources, because information can be very tightly controlled that way. And these sources are connected with the alliance, but there are no direct connections with each other. And I obtain information in a way that I'm not front loading them to where they're like, to where it's obvious what I'm looking for. I give them general guidelines of information that I'm looking at. Or if I've heard something from 2 other sources, I will ask them in a general way what they have heard about this incident, if anything. And if I get corroboration from at least 3 different sources, then I feel more comfortable coming out and delivering the information, but still noting that, the information is kind of, a living, breathing thing. The plan changes every week, every day, possibly every hour, because no full plan survives a battlefield. As soon as these people are trying to implement the plans, they're having pushback from very powerful and entrenched individuals within the government. So it's been, a tit for tat war, and the updates I've received recently is that like the DoD, for instance, there's so much infiltration and so many entrenched individuals that they're having problems, getting rid of. That there's kind of a stalemate going on pushing forward certain prosecutions that are, many of them, the investigations have wrapped up, or they're just being formalized. So it's there's a big political battle going on within the DOJ.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, like the Defender Europe exercises, when there was a plan apparently to kind of like take into custody a lot of these deep state elites. that because of the COVID-19, that was scrapped. Everything was kind of put on hold, and the kind of struggle is continuing. That this decision to implement and go ahead and conduct the arrests and have these people tried, that's all on hold because there's this deep state assets are all over the place, pulling strings to bring everything to a standstill. Is that essentially what's going on?
Well, in a way, I mean, there are a lot of people in the periphery that are still getting arrested. They're cleaning up all of the human trafficking stuff like crazy. I mean, that stuff's really being cleaned up in the background. So there's a lot that's being done, but the high level people, they're having a difficult time going after because these people are, very protected. And in some cases, in Europe, I was told there were instances where forces moved in and captured some of these high-ranking people, but they were basically blackmailed or extorted into releasing them because there was going to be some sort of a mass destructive type of event that would be done if they hadn't. So it was very similar to what happened down in Mexico last year or the year before, where the Mexican army moved in, arrested a cartel leader, and then the cartel surrounded the army. And then, within a short period of time, the army released the drug lord. It was kind of a similar brinksmanship situation that I was told about. But there are a lot of different MS-13 type groups, other groups like this that have been arrested. They're being handled by the Department of Justice, but also by military tribunals. They're so concerned leading up to the elections on the disruptions that they're hearing about that they think that the military thinks that the president needs to use his extraordinary powers as commander-in-chief when there are times of insurrection or traitors within the government. Those powers are pretty significant, but that would immediately launch into a very serious issue. There are so many weapons caches that we're aware of, or the Alliance is aware of, weapons that were looted in, during riots in cities from gun stores, sporting goods stores, but also groups outside of the U.S. bringing in weapons that are of a more of an assault weapon nature. And they know where a lot of these caches are, and they're expecting as we get closer to the election, and if the indictments were released leading up to the election, that these anarchist groups would these weapons would be passed out to them, and there would be open civil unrest. And they're saying that there is a real fear of a Marxist revolution occurring.
So that real fear, is that coming from the Trump administration or his military intelligence advisors?
It's not so much the Trump administration, it's the military intelligence and people associated with the alliance, which are mostly current, but a lot of former, just major people from the military who have retired, in many cases long ago.
Yeah. QAnon has been talking about steps taken to ensure the 2020 elections are not corrupted, or there's no vote tampering, which is why apparently the emphasis has shifted from potential vote tampering through electronic hacking and so forth, or rigging the machines, to this kind of mail-in ballot. So, according to your sources, is this what is probably going to be how this kind of Marxist revolution happens, that they rig the vote-in ballot somehow?
Well, this is more overt, I'm afraid. They're talking about open conflict in the streets, kind of back in the 60s, to where there would be bombings, targeted killings of like what we're seeing police officers and other individuals that they have a list of. An actual attack on the justice system to try to destroy the rule of law before, I mean, if they've completely destroyed the rule of law, how are indictments going to be enforced? How are they going to be received, by the public, if it's already in a revolutionary civil war kind of environment, which they're trying to foment right now,
Okay, so in a way, the QAnon people are really kind of downplaying this threat of a civil war type insurrection, which is very overt.
Yeah, I mean, what I've been hearing very recently, and Q hasn't posted that I've noticed in a little while, but there's definitely the information I'm getting is that there's concern that the not only the destruction of the police and the justice system, but certain states they think they're going to push for shutdowns for the pandemic. There are going to be all of these different efforts to suppress the vote for some people while opening up a situation for an election that they say would then be contested for many months after the election. They said those are the scenarios they're preparing for, but leading up to it, they are expecting more and more insurrection, basically.
Right. Well, I guess in the middle of all of this, we're going to have something moving towards disclosure, right? I mean, what with President Trump, bringing up that Roswell issue, the interview with his son.
Yeah, you would think, but I as I talked about when I was in the programs, the briefings were different on every level, and everyone thought they were getting the top briefings. And in these programs, you're working alongside people that are obviously from the late 40s or 60s, and by their demeanor and the way they talk. So how do you explain that? Well, you're pulled out of your time frame for 20 years and then serve in a program, and then you're put back. Why can't that be happening at different time frames? And they're being pulled into one local time bubble, so to speak, time reference. So when I was serving, there was more than likely, I was noting people, they might be from the 60s. Oh, this guy, the way he carries himself, 1940s for sure. Well, there were people doing that with me as well. People probably from the year 2023 that were serving the program on their 20 and back. And they're like, oh, this kid's probably from the 80s, by the way he talks, So, there was a time travel aspect to what's going on. But what people like the president, and I've been told that a number of POTUS briefings have informed the presidents that no, there are no ETs. There were a group of ETs that visited us in the distant past that were refugees from a dying planet, but nothing since then. And the presidents are all, then what about Roswell? And they're like, well, Mr. President, we were performing experiments during a time and in the exact same place that in the future we were using technology, very advanced technology, and it created a bridge situation to where that technology popped into this time frame and crashed. And so it was nothing but the US military from the future. And the presidents are like, son of a bitch, that makes so much sense. That's crazy. What about the aliens? There are no aliens, right? There was no crashed aliens. They're like, no, these are cover stories. We would even be happier with an alien cover story than what really happened. We can't let the public know because there's a space-time continuum thing to where you get to a certain development technologically, and then you have the ability to contact yourself in the future. And however far you contact yourself in the future, immediately that gap closes. and when you're in communion, and it becomes this temporal civilization or society.
So Trump has received a similar briefing to previous presidents, and we're talking Obama, Bush Jr., Clinton, that they all were told a similar story, that the Roswell crash didn't involve aliens, it was all humans from the future.
Correct. That's what I was told. And I was told that there are a lot of people that serve within the secret space program that are told that narrative as well, because they're compartmentalized where they do not run into non-terrestrials.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you said that you have different people in the programs from different time eras. Now, the briefers, the people who told, say, Trump this, are they from the present, or are we talking about people from different time streams or different ages that are doing these briefings with the president?
No, it would have been just kind of a normal briefing, same person that would have briefed him on a number of things that involve national security. And, here's the box with all the writing that explains the situation, and here it is. And, they read it to him and verbalize it, but don't give him much more other than what is written. And it was a narrative that there were no ETs, that it was just us in the future.
So that would be like the Director of National Intelligence or whoever does the presidential daily briefings. That is the group that is telling him this, or are we talking another group?
It's whoever would be doing his there are certain briefings that a president doesn't get after a certain amount of days serving in the presidency. I don't know the logistics of that, but I think it's to make sure that they're there, they're going to be fully there before certain information is given to them. And this was one of the briefings, and they all had to do with national security or global security type things. But that was just one of the things in a number of things, that he was briefed on, I'm told. I have to go off of what I'm told, of course. But I was told that it was the time travel narrative, and that is the narrative that's going to be put forth by the deep state. They're even describing that the UFOs seen in the sky in ancient times, in the 50s, and even now, are almost all UFOs in the future that are creating some sort of temporal butterfly effect between in time space, to where there's some sort of a spectacle that bleeds through in the sky that people see, and this narrative is being put forth that's almost everything that we're seeing in the sky.
So when was this narrative first used to brief the presidents? Because like assuming that with President Reagan, and I think this is something we've discussed in the past, he was given a limited briefing of the evil aliens or hostile aliens, and that's kind of motivated him to do his whole, let's unite the planet, let's unite the nations of the world against this common foe. So he received some sort of limited briefing of extraterrestrials being hostile, and that got him going. So the time travel narrative, did that kind of like get used on? I mean, I think Bush Senior would have known that he would have had a big, good overview of what was going on. So was it used, for example, say on Clinton, because Clinton started his presidential administration being very interested on UFOs. So was that the first time it was used, or was it before?
I was told it was more of a recent change in narrative, that the powers that be have shifted several times on how they're going to proceed with a disclosure, and they've had issues, or they've pushed forward a little bit with one, and then they go in a different direction. And what was decided in some big meeting of some sort, negotiation, was that they were going to reveal more information about our secret space program and how it's been in communication with uh, our program in the future for some time, that it was of huge importance to keep it secret because of timeline things and all kinds of other excuses they'll give. But it's going to be a rollout of that. And then they're going to roll out information of more of our ancient history of um, the groups that came from an exploded planet and came to our planet and brought civilization.
So this is really just the way the disclosure process is going to start. Just that we are going to be given a kind of limited disclosure of time traveling humans from the future. That explains UFOs and the Roswell crash. Um, so when Trump was interviewed by his son, and the Roswell question came up, was that staged? Is this kind of like part of the process of getting us ready for disclosure, or was it just a synchronicity?
No, I don't think it was a synchronicity because uh, the current president's been pushing to release technologies to aggregate some of these secret programs under Space Force so that through Space Force they can be revealed and utilized by a wider group of people. So I think this is part of a longer process. You know, his uncle worked on the Tesla papers in some fashion. So in his family line, he has to have heard that there's more advanced technology. You know, so that is something that I think that he's dedicated or wants to get out to the public in whatever way he can. And I think Space Force is one of the ways to do that. But I think we're going to see a lot of hints. I mean, we're seeing the ATIP stuff coming out, videos of UFOs, tracked by Navy pilots. I think more and more of that type of thing is going to occur, and they're going to start revealing their craft, the secret space program craft to us. Um, Here and there a lot more. We're going to start seeing little videos of triangular craft, and they're going to start acclimating us to different principles as well. And the movies that they help get out, they're going to help get out principles that are going to help people understand time travel more, and um, because we can get our minds around space now, the vastness of space, but the time aspect is something that most people can't wrap their minds around.
Now, I remember you saying about just a few days after Trump began his administration, he issued a presidential memorandum telling the military intelligence community to release the national security orders on over 1,000 patents that have been kind of held up. Currently, there's about 5,800 patents that are all held up under national security orders, and you said 1,000 of these were to be released within 2 years, and that they mainly had to do with energy and with kind of health technology. Do you have any update on that?
No, I don't. I don't. I just know that he's made extreme efforts to get this technology um, released, and he's had extreme resistance within the Department of Energy, within aspects of the Department of Defense, within the intelligence groups. There's been a lot of pushback. There are a number of groups that just they don't want this technology out yet.
Okay. So in the um, message you sent me a week or so ago, describing this temporal war between these two factions. One faction is a human society in the future, which is much smaller than us in terms of population, which is controlled by AI, and the other future humans are a group that is kind of following the positive timeline, the Anshar, and so forth. So can you kind of like elaborate a bit on that? You know, especially with this timeline, like especially the wing makers. I think you mentioned the wing makers.
It was interesting. The person told me that uh, the narrative that's finally going to come out is going to be similar to what's going on, that there is a timeline war, but they're going to remove ETs and uh, a lot of what's really going on out of it, and say that it's just a timeline war. And it is. It's between the timeline war is between an AI type of timeline and a more spiritually ascended type of timeline. And the information that they're going to eventually put out is that there was this wingmakers type group, is what they called it, that was sending information back from the future that was warning us of not going the direction that they went, to where they had a very, very, very small population that was managed by AI and synthetic beings. They were warning us against that path. So, and then there was another group that they're going to tell us about that's more of a malevolent, or more of a, more of a positive, I'm sorry, type of group that is trying to guide us to more of a positive timeline. But they are kind of military type, according to, because they're trying to build up the programs that they're saying that the programs we're doing now, people will work their way up after decades in these programs, and then all of a sudden, while they're in these programs, they have these special devices to where they're receiving information from the wider corporate conglomerate that's off in a different kind of time bubble. And there would basically be people from the future sending them information on these devices. And, they're communicating back and forth with people that are basically in the future. And, these people work their way up after decades of being loyal and diligent people in the programs, and they get, all of a sudden they get this big promotion, and then they're put in front of this desk, and they said, okay, you're going to be communicating with people in the past, and by the way, you already have the script for some of those because you're going to be sending some to yourself. So these people are like, oh my God, the whole time, some of these messages were coming from myself from the future. So, I mean, it's kind of like a real mind bending sort of thing that these, people actually do experience. But like I said, they're going to tweak the narrative quite a bit to remove the more advanced, super advanced space programs and extraterrestrials. They're going to take it completely out of the narrative.
So what we're likely to see then is just this narrative emerging about the temporal war, that UFOs or some kind of anomaly emerging out of this kind of temporal travel between these two different future human groups. Now, with the AI controlled human group, which is much smaller, are they actively intervening now in some way to kind of like influence our timeline towards a kind of AI dominated society?
Yeah, the way that they've been intervening is sending information into the past. Um, so I mean, uh, they've sent information in the past to the past to try to change. One of the people that was um, telling me about this change of narrative told me that a lot of these people they're now infiltrating this QAnon movement, and they're trying to kind of change the narrative a little bit, about the time travel and all of that. And so that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye out for.
Mm-hmm. So is it possible then that like some Silicon Valley companies like Google and maybe YouTube and Facebook, that they are being influenced from this AI dominated society in the future to kind of like bring about a kind of AI dominant society today in terms of like manicuring the major narratives that people are now reading on their social media. And of course, the major media is all controlled, but the social media, we're seeing that's being kind of curated in a particular way. And it seems that algorithms and AI are playing a bigger and bigger role.
Yeah, there's definitely an AI component because these groups are major AI prophets. They think that AI is, the only thing that is incorruptible or not, that is, would be amoral enough to kind of rule our disgusting civilization as they see it. So yeah, AI is definitely a part of it. They get all of these big corporations, they have people on their boards that are secretly a part of this big super board, this interplanetary corporate conglomerate that has people rotating in all the time and out. And they are not only creating policy and working with extraterrestrials and trade and all sorts of other things, but they're also helping determine what narrative is going to play out on Earth, which they very much feel is in their purse.
Okay, so really this kind of new narrative that's going to emerge, that Roswell, time traveling, uh, time travelers from the future, and that's what UFOs are all about. This is going to be something that is going to be pushed onto the planet for some time, and it's all done to kind of like keep us from the truth about the bigger space programs, the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, and of course extraterrestrials. So is Space Force, is the creation of Space Force, is that something to uh, help us break through that, or will Space Force be co-opted into this kind of more limited hangout that we're witnessing?
Well, Space Force is going to be controlled by, the uh, the over government, to a certain degree, whoever just controls the Department of Defense to some degree. There's always going to be more of a bureaucratic kind of control over this group. But this group was designed to be one moniker to bring all of these other smaller programs, military industrial complex type programs, level programs, together under one moniker so that they could be disseminated to the public using a lot of plausible deniability about all these other programs. They can just say, oh, DARPA developed this group developed this. We kind of brought them together and created what we have now. And it's going to allow them to give recognition to scientists that have done amazing work that have never been able to get the recognition for it. They're going to be able to start. I mean, that's how we're going to start seeing a lot of the information coming out. We're going to be told before we even see it. We're going to be told, oh, this exists. There are patents, and this person came up with this formula, and we're going to start finding out. That's one of the biggest carrots that they've given a lot of these academics, is that in the future, as we unroll this stuff, in the beginning, you guys are going to be the rock stars. You guys are going, you're going to be recognized for all of your sacrifices and everything you did. There are a lot of other carrots as well that keep these people quiet and working. But yeah, I was told that a lot of how information would start coming out would be through technological magazines or groups that discovered a new patent, or a person, they interviewed a person that developed a patent for the government, and now it's being declassified, and they're able to talk about these wonderful engineering feats or formulas that they came up with that were brilliant, that they could be recognized for. So we're going to be acclimated to the information.
So then you don't think there's going to be any kind of major official disclosure by the president that we are being visited from humans from the future, and Roswell was a craft from the future that crashed? Or you think it's going to be more just this kind of piecemeal organic process where certain technologies are going to be declassified, patents revealed, kind of like like with Salvador Payas and his 5 patents for the Navy, kind of like outlining revolutionary technologies. Is that what we can expect more of in the future? And that's just going to accumulate, and we're going to have this more technologically evolved society evolving, but not through any kind of major disclosure that this was all done secretly decades ago.
Yeah, it's going to. Yeah, from what I'm told, I'm not expecting any type of big announcements really ever from like a president. Um, I think it was probably delivered to the president in a way to where they're like, there are weird things going on, timelines and stuff, but what you've done creating Space Force is a big step forward in bringing those kind of timelines together. These people are in our near future, so it's not that far away. Between now and then, it's important that we keep it secret, but there's no alien threat. Nothing like that, for the world to worry about. So um, that's going to put the president at ease to a certain degree, I would think. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm told that that's kind of how information is going to be delivered. It's going to be slowly delivered, through releases of patents or different formulas or engineering techniques that will come out, and people will like, where the hell did that come from? How did you get from here to here? And then they'll be able to start declassifying things enough to where scientists can come out and say, I can't say much about the program, but I developed this, 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 and this. And then, more and more pieces will come together. They're going to do it in a way much, kind of like, the same groups put together QAnon, a big counterintelligence move. They put out information in a way that causes people to do the research themselves, and they put the pieces together themselves, and then they own that information. People can't come to them and say that's a conspiracy theory. They own it because they went through the process of the research. And I think they're trying to release information in a slow kind of way that same type of thing will occur. But like I said, the disclosure that uh, all the powers that be, including uh, elements of the alliance, they're wanting a slow release of information, like over 50 years. Um, Later on, the ET stuff can come in, but it's just too much for us to handle right now. Let's just get us acclimated to this new physics and new technologies that are coming in, and concepts of time and space. Gravity is the engine of time, and understanding how time works, and how these temporal technologies work, and how once we understand um, um, the correct model of physics, of the electric universe, uh, that all of these things are going to make a lot more sense to us. And then after a certain period of acclimation, we would be they would let us know more and more about ETs and other programs that we have that are further out into the universe. But they were going to keep it real close to home, and that it's just us time traveling.
Okay, so it looks like they're going to just move forward with this very limited disclosure process that could last for up to 50 years and just incrementally add to our knowledge pool to help us evolve. Now, how does that reconcile with some of the information that you've been discussing in the past, that we're going to have possibly a micronova event in 2030, and that this is going to lead to monumental changes? We're talking about some kind of earth changes, possibly an ascension event. So how does that kind of gradual 50-year limited disclosure narrative work with this impending solar flash that we anticipate around 2030?
Well, see, that's not a part of the narrative at all. Um, they're not sharing information about the solar flash with the president. All of this, none of this information is a part of this narrative. They're looking at hundreds of years into the future of going this way or that way. They're they're not telling anyone except for the highest people that know about this solar flash event. That's this information coming out about this micronova. is very disturbing to a lot of these elites because it's been a part of their dogma and religion. They found remnants of green and orange glass on the moon that they tested, and they know are remnants of ejecta of the sun. They know the cycles of which when these things have occurred. They know we're overdue, but they don't want anyone really on Earth or the lower level people running the planet to know what's happening. The people that are building deep underground bases, many of them have never heard of a solar event. They know that they're building for something under some narrative that they've been given. They've been given some narrative, but many of them have no idea that there could be or has been a solar event of that magnitude in our solar system throughout history. It is something that when we started coming out with it, there were a lot of people that took notice, you know, up high, because it's wasn't a narrative that they really wanted playing out in public.
So that where does that leave you? I know you've been, ever since you came out, been really pushing for full disclosure, and certainly others have been helping you do that, including myself. So what does that mean? Does that mean we just kind of like try and make the best out of this bad situation? There's going to be this kind of incremental drip disclosure process. Some advanced tech is going to be released through patents, or is there something else that we can do to kind of like help raise the consciousness about, the full disclosure situation?
Well, what we can really do is do our best to keep putting out this information. Unfortunately, a part of them coming out with this new narrative is that they have to quash our narrative. So you're going to see more and more efforts to kind of trivialize the ET narrative and push their narrative more. And people like ourselves who are out there giving, the narrative that they don't want, they're going to do more and more to push us aside and quiet our voices. But unless we have people within the programs who want full disclosure to sneak out or bring to us some information to disclose, it's going to be a battle of narratives. And unfortunately, the narrative that is supported by the powers that be, these different groups that agreed on it, they have the power to release, if we say no, there are ETs and there are bases here and there, and they're like, well, show me a picture. Well, I can't. We're like, well, look, we can show you a picture. As a matter of fact, look, over my left shoulder is coming one of these craft now. And then everyone's, ooh, ah, and then they're not going to listen to the other narrative. They've got something tangible. So they're going to be able to tweak the narrative. And I'm told that groups like the TTSA and other groups are going to start bringing out more and more very impressive information and examples of technology that are really going to get attention, and with that attention, they're going to be able to pivot the narrative.
So, how are you being advised or assisted by, say, the ANSHA or the Sphere Being Alliance in terms of helping move things towards that optimal timeline that you've talked about in the past? I mean, is this limited disclosure narrative that's emerging, is that something, it doesn't sound like it will help us get onto that optimal timeline, or does it?
I don't know exactly what knowledge was needed, to get on the optimal timeline. What I was shown is that there wasn't really a full disclosure until the actual solar event occurred. That's when ETs came and assisted us, so it was kind of pointless to deny them. So, I think what I've been shown to focus on is finding different ways of getting this information out to the wider public. And it's the civilization that we live in, the way information is delivered is through the entertainment industry, for lack of a better word. So we're pushing, there are people that we've been talking to that are working with some of these Asian royal groups that are trying to bring about a financial shift with a lot of gold and other things that they claim they have. There are a number of groups that are doing things that we're hoping to start doing documentaries on and incorporating into movie scripts to start affecting the mass consciousness in a positive way and seeding it and getting it ready for the wider information, the full disclosure. So when they are told, oh no, it's just us from the future, they will ask, oh, well, what about all these people that have all of these encounters with these gray looking beings? What about this? What about that? If we're pushing that into the consciousness, keeping that in the frontal lobes of the mass consciousness, then people will be asking those types of questions, um, you know, as a logical process. I think, like I said, other than someone in the programs that is somehow able to bring out some sort of technology or proof, which is very, very difficult. Unless something like that happens, this is going to be sort of a battle of narratives, and it's an information war.
So, how do you think the QAnon information fits into this limited disclosure narrative that's going to be pushed by the alliance? Do you think QAnon is going to kind of try and push for more information? Because I mean, QAnon has already kind of hinted at extraterrestrial life, saying that we are not alone, that secret space programs exist. So QAnon has already kind of hinted at that. So could QAnon be a vehicle for more of the truth coming out, or is that just going to be co-opted into this limited disclosure narrative?
Well, QAnon, there's a big operation, and I don't know why they called it this. They dubbed this huge counterintelligence operation against the QAnon movement as Operation Austin Powers. And they said that just like what kind of happened to the ufology community not too long ago, with the QAnon community, that they have people that they've been infiltrating the community to bring in certain narratives, and that there's a lot of electronic surveillance going on of people in the QAnon movement. They're looking for ways to blackmail and discredit these various individuals. There's a lot of really dirty stuff going on, and there are people that are being brought in that are kind of trying to become public figures, that are being brought in to try to cause division and twist the narrative. I was told that one of the narratives was going to be that in the early 60s, when the alliance really kicked off and started, I was told that one part of the narrative was going to be that that's where the plan came in, and that it was delivered to us from the future mysteriously, and that we've been following this plan. And I was told that there were some very brilliant admirals and generals and their teams that put together this plan back in the late 50s and early 60s. But the narrative is going to be that it came from the future, just to further kind of discredit it.
Right. I mean, there was that incident involving President Eisenhower, Area 51, around 1958, and apparently that was a trigger for Eisenhower putting together some group, or maybe Eisenhower was approached by some group in the future to basically get this plan up and running.
Yeah, could be. But, I was told that that was going to be kind of a false narrative, that actually, there were some very brilliant generals and admirals and strategic types at the time that put together this plan that they've been following up until now.
All right, so I guess just to kind of like sum it all up for those of us that have been kind of closely watching the full disclosure movement, watching your information come out, that basically up until the solar flash event, if it does occur, obviously we don't want it to occur, but that's only that's the most likely trigger for the kind of full disclosure that we've been working with. And up until then, it's just going to be this very incremental, slow disclosure process of more patents being made available and companies basically putting these patents into production, and there'll be some progress in that way, but it'll be much less rapid than we would have liked.
Yeah, much less rapid than what the full disclosure community would like. But this is kind of, alliance groups and cabal groups as a part of this war, and some of the cabal withdrawing here and there. They're like negotiating, negotiated retreats, negotiated surrenders here and there. And, there's some people, even on the alliance side, that, they're doing the right thing now, but they had done things in the past that they would rather not go to prison for. There's all sorts of situations to where they would like to give certain people time to live their life and die before information comes out.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful. Well, anyone that listens to this is going to get a lot of really helpful information and get themselves ready for what's coming over the rest of this decade.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like we'll ever fully get rid of corruption. We'll just have varying degrees of it, because we always have these people that think they know better, and that they know what's palatable to us, so they will feed it to us through an eyedropper. And those people are in control, and they feel like they have the moral authority to make these decisions, even though we don't agree. So I think us pushing back, putting out information about the various ET groups that are interacting with, not just visiting the Earth, but interacting with various people in the population, people that have been in these programs that are coming out here and there. We need to assist in making sure that information stays in, like I said, the frontal lobe of this community and the the mass consciousness, because they're going to control the narrative, and for a number of years, it's going to be a very exciting time of us understanding new physics, understanding how time works, and how people work with other groups and each other through time. And it's going to bring a whole new expansion of consciousness, but it's not going to be the full expansion that we need before this solar event, and that can only occur through full disclosure.
Yeah, great. Well put. Well, I guess as far as the recording goes, that's probably going to be good for people. As far as me personally, it's like, well, it's kind of a little disappointing that we're not going to have that more full disclosure process. But I guess it's learning to surf the waves, and the waves might not be what you like or want, but these are the waves coming, and just got to learn to surf that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons in my cave briefing I had just had more of this information reiterated to me, and it was upsetting. I've been talking about a much wider disclosure, much different amount of information coming out, and I was told, yes, that's what we want. And then all of these forces kind of pulled back and said, we're going to deliver information a little bit differently. So yeah, it's frustrating. Also, I was in that cave, and apparently a lot of tourists go in there and pump out CO2 and leave, and there's no wind that comes in. So I was in there for a little while, and there was no oxygen in that place. I will not be doing a video from that cave again. But yeah, I mean, there's the briefings are starting up again. They're not quite what they used to be. Less information and more narrow band of information. I used to, they would talk, and down in Venezuela. Oh, and also we heard, and I would get this nice broad swath of information, and then sometimes you could see where different pieces tied in. It was like really useful, but now they're just giving little, panels of the overall view. And I hear that's being done to everyone for operational security.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I guess the best we can do is just put out the information as we get it, and let people read it, and that helps them, develop their understanding of what's going on. Well, I'm glad we could talk and do this face to face. It's great seeing you again.
We'll have to chat more.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for watching the Sphere Being Alliance channel. Make sure you click on subscribe and smash the bell to make sure you're receiving all the new content from the Sphere Being Alliance YouTube channel.